Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our next edition of the Speed webinar series. My name is Graham, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Our team of encryption and authentication experts will be joining us today to discuss President Biden's executive order on cybersecurity and lessons learned from our recent deployment at the U.S. Department of Energy. In terms of logistics, just a few points to touch on before we get into today's panel discussion. First, I'd like to remind you all that the webinar will be recorded and a link will be delivered included in the thank you emails and delivered right to your inbox. Please, we encourage you to fill out the survey at the end of the presentation so that we can continue to use your feedback to deliver quality relevant content. And finally, please drop any questions you may have into the Q&A box below. We will do our best to get to them during today's presentation, but if they aren't answered today, a Webmatics representative will reach out to you directly. With that, let's get into introducing today's panelists. All right, so as you can see, we've got three lovely fellows joining me today on the webinar. We have Gary, a common, how do I put this, guest panelist on our webinar discussions these days. He's our CISO and VP of Technology here at Webmatics. Next, I would like to welcome T to his first appearance on the webinar. He's our CEO and co-founder of Webmatics. We're really happy and lucky to have him here today. And last, but certainly not least, thankfully, we have Lloyd Grimes as well, our customer success manager here at Webmatics. With that said, let's get started into today's panel discussions. All right, so let's start with a high-level view about the executive order and this project and maybe how it relates to the industry and the market now and going forward into the future. As the CEO of Webmatics T, you might have some unique viewpoints to share with us. Do you want to share those with us now?
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending our webinar. As security professionals, we all know the need to beef up IT security, especially after numerous recent attacks. The Colonial Pipeline, the Acacia right now, big time everywhere, and many other attacks, prompt the world to react. But we believe the main attack which prompt the executive order is the SolarWinds attack. In January this year, President Biden instructed DHS to investigate the cyber attacks. And for the SolarWinds attack, it was stated, this is the greatest cyber intrusion, perhaps in the history of the world. Well, the SolarWinds attack, actually it's not SolarWinds attack, it's at least Microsoft and VMware and many other companies were hacked as well, show that attackers are much more sophisticated than the whole world or we have believed. The attack exploit technique, and some of them, many of them applying on vulnerabilities the world have always believed to be just theoretical, meaning, it is theoretical vulnerabilities, but it cannot be practically attacked. For an example, for the MFA bypass attack, the attacker successfully get the secret key of the authentication server. These ADFS servers are considered tier 0 infrastructure, and so they are very well protected and they are considered unpenetrable, and yet attacker got it. So many other attacks are similarly or less sophisticated, but we wouldn't be surprised that the whole world are using technology which are vulnerable and they are no longer fit for this kind of attack. I wouldn't be surprised that many laptops have been stolen and people can read it because the laptop don't even have pre-boot authentication, let alone MFA. I think I like to read to you what I find very correct from the William Blair research in December last year. It stated that the SolarWinds attack may be the tipping point that helps drive changes in governmental policies, compliance, and business responses, elevating cybersecurity to a societal level risk. This could result in increased investment level as government funding, compliance measures, and security investment become a larger focal point for a longer time. And as expected, the EO came showing that government see clearly the need to improve cybersecurity. With the EO itself, I personally see two interesting directions. The first one is, you see the cyber attack are on the network and on the server, but the requirement to beef up encryption and MFA seem to be toward more on the endpoint. And so we like that direction because we believe that IT security starts with the endpoint. If you have a strong endpoint, strong authentication, protecting the network is much easier. The other interesting direction I see is that, focus on encryption and authentication means you focus on the cryptography because they all use cryptography. And the idea is prevention with cryptography. And cryptography is a very good defense mechanism. You can generate the key easily, but you can very difficultly attack the key. So 1 ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So by focusing on preparation and on prevention, the world probably will see a better effectiveness on cybersecurity than the current chasing threats mentality. I'm excited because I think the time is right. The whole industry have been working on passwordless authentication, on several technology in the last 10 years. And with the right investment, with the right focus, the world is now paying attention to, and the EO is the example for that. I believe that we can see very good future innovation in the time ahead. I look forward to that, and I think this is a very exciting time for us.
Awesome. That sounds super exciting. We're clearly moving into a very exciting time. Now, in terms of moving our focus a little bit more towards the industry itself, what reactions have we been seeing to the EO across the industry as a whole?
I'll take that one, Graham. Actually, there's been a few key reactions across the industry, specifically starting to address the mandate for encryption of data in transit as well as at rest. This has been an existing recommendation within the agencies. That said, it's not always been possible for the agencies to address that, as well as taking a look at some specific use cases. It's possibly due to a lack of available solutions, or maybe just even a lack of understanding visibility with those solutions in those scenarios. So taking those things in consideration, we should also note that CMMC, which mandates these practices for contractors, has always been in place, but the executive order brings everything full circle with that regard. Now, the executive order itself also says to agencies that they have 180 days with regards to actually putting this in place. And during that 180 days, they have to do a progress report every 60 days back to what's taken place. Then there's the other piece, which is the multi-factor authentication, which T mentioned, which is already making a good amount of traction within the industry as we see it. But at the same time, there are some complexities that are going on there, which goes back to my previous point, taking a look at specific use cases and the difficulty there to solve them and finding the solutions that best fit for that time. The last piece of this that we're seeing and kind of the key factor there is the timeline. Super stringent with 180 days. We foresee that there's going to be some opportunities for slippage and people not being able to meet those numbers, but that's kind of the nature of the beast as we go forward, right? So we just have to keep forging ahead and making sure we're addressing it.
Okay, awesome. Glad to see that overall the industry has reacted well and is starting to move forward. Now, for the US Fed and specific related organizations, where else can they go in terms of guidance to help facilitate and execute on this EO?
I'll take that one, Graham, because you know I'm a really big NIST fan, and NIST is the go-to source for technical guidance, federal agencies. And the one that I think applies most, at least for the MFA part, is NIST SP 863B on authentication and lifecycle management. There's lots of good stuff in that document, but one of the things I like the best is that they define 3 authenticator assurance levels, level 1, 2, and 3. They all provide some resistance against attacks, but the higher the level, the more resistance. Level 1 will allow passwords and single factor authentication, but I want to point out the whole point of the executive order is saying that's not good enough anymore. So you have to go beyond that. Level 2, it's better, and it does require multi-factor authentication, and it provides some assurance, but not very high confidence. But not all MFA is created equal, and this points out that some of the MFA factors like SMS text messages for one-time passwords are actually restricted, and they recommend basically against using that. That's because of the well-known SIM swap being attacked and so forth. And then there's level 3. Level 3 provides the very high confidence in the authentication, and it provides very high level of confidence in the authentication because it's based on possession of a cryptographic key and proof of that. So it's based on cryptography. And as Steve was mentioning, I think there's a really good opportunity here to move forward with improving things using cryptography. FIDO and smart cards are the leading implementations of authentication utilizing asymmetric cryptography. So that's what we need to keep our eye on for the future.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Thanks for taking that. That, again, very clear answer to that question. What should an organization look to do, or maybe what are the options available? What should they be taking into consideration when adopting MFA or other similar security type technologies for that matter?
The point there, and kind of to address that question for you, Graham, is the executive order focuses on security, right? So as security professionals, we can't forget about the user experience. One of the things that we have the opportunity to do is influence how people are at the endpoint experiencing and using their laptop. So you can't take that out of consideration. I would suggest taking maybe just a simple 4-step approach. Make an exhaustive list of all the scenarios that would fit within your organization. Define your top 2 to 3 scenarios, understanding which are most important for the business, but also specifically address the vulnerabilities. Take those top 2, pilot them, work through that solution, see how it actually resolves and goes forward with regards to the solution that you've provided, but also take how it actually goes through with regards to your future needs. The one thing that you don't want to do is take a look at this solution and have to backtrack a year later and understand what's taking place there. So really understanding their roadmap and how it directly affects your needs. Those are how I do.
All right, awesome. No, thanks. That really lined it up nice and simple and easy to follow. 4 clear steps. Now, as we're moving on with our panel discussion here today, we're moving into what we're calling our first rapid fire segment. Now, in the rapid fire segment, all our panelists will have a hard cap of about 30 seconds to answer these questions. All right. So knowing this now, let's see if we can get our answers under 30. With this, first up, it looks like it's going to be for Gary. With the clock on Biden's mandate already running, do you have any advice for organizations that are feeling the pressure to meet this deadline?
Okay, well, it's going to be a journey, so better get started now. The good news is that FIDO password authentication technology has been maturing for the last 7 years or so, but now it's really ready for prime time. So I think this is an opportunity not just to introduce MFA, but to introduce MFA and eliminate passwords at the same time. And as I mentioned before, that FIDO with that asymmetric cryptography gives us the chance to go to that very high level confidence level that NIST defines.
All right. Well, you managed to squeeze it all in with half a second to spare. Awesome. Well done, Gary. All right. It looks like the next one in the rapid fire segment is going to be for Lloyd. For those government organizations, are we expecting a trickle down from this mandate?
Absolutely. And we're already seeing it. So several state governments and counties have already started moving forward and being very proactive and making sure that their security posture is better. While the mandate specifically talks to FCEB agencies, we've seen a heightened need with regards to large federal contractors as well. Some of these are because of CMMC requirements, but our direct order really because of the executive order.
Okay, awesome. And well done. Again, looking at less than a second. Well done. Okay, so now moving on to we'll continue on with more, how do I put this? Traditional panel approach. Next up, it looks like I have a question for Gary, and it's focusing more on choosing the right solution for an organization. So choosing the right solution can seem like a daunting task. Gary, how do you recommend organizations approach this?
Okay, well, I think the goal is to improve user experience, reduce risk, and reduce IT costs. And you have to keep all 3 of those in mind. Being a security guy, I usually gravitate to the security first thing, and so does the executive order, because that's what's really driving that. But I'm still not that naive to think that the whole thing could not fail if the users are left out of the equation. So you got to, I think that's probably one of the most important things to do to keep in your process. So I have and you're going to show it as I go, because I know we talked about this. I have a 6-step journey to passwordless authentication, MFA. First of all, do that risk assessment on your information systems. A risk is a function of impact and probability. The higher the impact and the higher the probability, the higher the risk is. The probability might, if it's connected to the internet, well, you already probably have a higher probability. And then when you're doing your requirements, the other thing is take a look at your users. What kind of authentication methods, devices work for them best? Is it using their laptop itself as the authentication, second factor, a phone, an external key? Got to consider the users and let the IT team weigh in too, because they're the ones that are going to have to deploy it and support it, and we want to keep costs down. Step 2 is the strategy. Strategy, I think, is, well, if you can't get it all done in 180 days, start with the highest risk systems first. Lay down a good, strong foundation, and then try to keep as much commonality between your first system or systems and your subsequent systems to keep things simple across the board for both IT and your users. Step 3 is proceed to a proof of concept. And this is not just technical, this is also to get your users on board. You want to have your users to be very enthusiastic supporters of your chosen authentication methods, so everybody else will want to get on board. Step 4, deploy and monitor. Take what you learned in the proof of concept and roll it out to your users. And step 5, well, now you're approaching true passwordless. So once all the systems, and it may take some time to be converted to passwordless login, then you got to remember to go back to your identity server. That could be like Active Directory or others, and eliminate any passwords that are still hanging around in there, because those are still attack surface until they're removed. Step 6 is basically the future. If you lay a strong foundation that's based on cryptographic, the high level, very high level assurance, you have the ability to address and pivot quickly to address evolving threats in the future. That's my 6 steps, Graham.
All right, awesome. Okay, so moving on to our next portion of the Q&A. Looks like we're getting to rapid fire segment number 2. Okay, so we're moving on to the longer one here. Specifically for this rapid fire segment, we're going to be focusing on the element of addressing rollout challenges. So my first question is going to be directed towards UT. MFA is a change for a user, and we all know that users really hate disruption and any sort of change to the environment that they're working with. How can we help users smooth the adoption of MFA so that they don't forego the security aspect of it?
30 seconds, okay? The good thing about passwordless authentication, which is beyond MFA a bit, is that not only it makes it impossible for attacker over the network to steal your identity, it makes so that you are free from remembering long and complex and many passwords. You only have to remember a PIN, a biometrics, or sometimes even nothing. So the idea is that you offload the complex part, the cryptography, the difficult part to a device. The only thing you have to do is to carry the device and unlock it whatever way you believe you need to do. So the local gesture can be easy. So unlike other solution where user resist changes, I believe that doing the things right, the IT administrator will see user will be the proponent. They will be the one who say, I want passwordless solution. I don't want to go back to the own way anymore. So that is an easy question.
All right, awesome. And well, two seconds over 30. Uh-oh. Oh, so close. Oh, almost there, almost there. Now, moving on to the next one towards Lloyd. Do you have any suggested strategies for simplifying MFA and encryption rollout?
I do. Very clearly make a plan and don't try and do it all at once. Importantly, for the success of that is making sure that your end users like that process. So start with a few scenarios, going back to a couple of points earlier, ideally 2 or 3, clearly define the path and what you're going to do. Remember, one of the key ways to get users to adopt is by using authentication only when needed. And then possibly look at a tier rollout scenario, so you're covering the most important elements of the business.
Okay, awesome. Well done. Managed to keep that 5 seconds short of 30. Okay, so we know who our winner here is today. Next up is Gary, no pressure. We mentioned earlier that one of the hardest challenges is getting buy-in from end users. How can IT leaders address this hesitancy to adopt a new technology?
Well, I'm a big fan of security awareness training for your user base. Make sure that they're all aware of the dangers and that they're all are responsible for security. But again, as we know, users mostly just care about getting their job done without sort of any unnecessary friction. So whatever the solution needs it needs to work for them. We've already touched upon that. And if we eliminate the password, then it can be simpler and quicker for them. So they'll flock to the solution. And your happy users, at least your lead new users, can be your internal proponents.
All right, well done, Gary. Managed to keep it under 30. I think this is an improvement on the last time. I'm reading here that it's at 29.35 seconds. Well done. Okay, so Lloyd, gonna hit you with a second whammy on this one. If there was one point you would like to make for those looking at the possibility of adopting MFA and encryption and together, what would it really be?
The most important part for me for that is looking at them as one main solution to solve one main problem. So authentication to your device or your applications, bringing all that together within one single product to solve both problems, TCO, as well as your user experience. There's no need to look at these in two separate buckets anymore. Bring them together, one solution for those two problems.
Okay, awesome. You did even better than last time. That one was only 20. Lloyd's killing it today. Well done. Okay, so now I'm going to pivot the focus of this panel discussion to focus a little bit more on the elements of the Department of Energy use case, as we promised that we get into. So with the focus now on that use case, what was Department of Energy, what was their challenge and what brought them to us in the first place? Can you provide a little background there?
So as the customer success manager here, we understood a little bit more of the background and having the conversations with them and leading up to all of that. So it started really with regards to the situation that the department was in. And what I mean by that is they wanted to make sure that they were able to use Linux on their endpoints. But that being a simple looking challenge, they wanted to make sure that they have encryption using PIV cards as their smart cards for their MFA. So pulling that forward and doing a little bit of discovery there, using PIV cards as their multi-factor authentication and devices for all devices also have to have an FDE solution. That's the mandate from the DEO, right? So that's also going back to the executive order. So in pursuit of that solution, they had to look at a couple of options with regards to native encryption and some tools. That said, the challenge there was no support for PIV cards for FDE, specifically for Linux. So top that off with the immediate need, and that's how we started to be able to dig into what they needed from us.
Okay, awesome. That's great. That really sets the table here. I think obviously most of the group can see what my next question is going to be. And now that we've kind of outlined the challenges, what did the solution really look like?
Okay, well, I'll take that one, Graham. So Webmatics had a long history of working in the federal space, going back to 2000 when we got a special version of SecureDoc certified by the NSA for classified secrets. We've also supported PIV cards for MFA since for a long time. That made the integration for the DOE very easy, and we could do that within just a few weeks. SecureDoc for Linux was the lead technology because we're looking at Linux here, and it supports PIV cards and POTUS encryption. But there was a lot more to it than that in terms of value. As the DOE realized as it rolled out. First of all, with this one central management, the deployment was very easy and to monitor. And that same platform that can be used for Linux to manage Linux can also be used to manage their Windows, and if they were to have Mac in the future, as well as their cloud and servers. And I guess the other thing I want to point out here is that the PIV card is one of those authentication methods that's cryptographically based. So it's the one on the, sort of the very high level of confidence authentication. So it was a good choice. PIV card is a good choice. I guess there are other thing I want to mention probably that was a key value that the DOE got out of their deployment was the use of the network. SecureDoc supports the network at pre-boot. We call it PB Connects, pre-boot connection, and it provides a number of different benefits in terms of management and user ability. You know, one of the things was in the staging, we could use the DOE could use the PB Connects to the network for staging the users for PIV card protection, making it very easy for them. It's sort of like think of it similar to be a domain controller in Windows.
Okay, awesome. All right, so now looking at that, what about servers and how is the admin access managed in this case?
Okay, well, they're slightly different questions, but they both have a sort of the same answer. And again, it's leverage the network.
Oh, Gary, but before you go any further, do you want to just turn your mic on and off real quick? We're just getting a little audio crackle here.
All right. Is that better?
A little bit.
Okay, let's move on. We don't have time anymore.
Yes, we don't have time for, sorry, we have time for fix that. I'll keep it brief then. For servers, the thing you need to do is be able to boot securely, but unattended. And the idea here is to auto boot the servers if they're on network and have access to the central manager. But if they're taken off the network, they're fully encrypted and they can't boot. And the other thing we can leverage with the network to solve a problem is the typical thing where we create the same administrative account on every device, share username and passwords. Don't know from a security point of view. And what we can do here is use PB Connects to give every admin their own account on each machine so that we can preserve accountability.
Okay, that definitely makes a lot more sense. Thank you for clarifying that up. Lloyd, in terms of our takeaways, what are some of our major lessons learned from our experience with the Department of Energy?
Major lessons learned of operating systems that vendors have their own native encryption. But even with that built-in encryption, they can't support PIV cards. So most of the native solutions have to be built from the ground up, which, as you can probably tell, is big operational and manpower required to be able to do that. And those costs that fold into that. So really nothing available, quote unquote, out of the box. But essentially, the DOE was ahead of the curve with regards to their thinking and executing on this project. And taking that look at how that cybersecurity executive order rolled in, it all kind of came together in a perfect match. That said, while it's a basic requirement and agencies at the time have kind of settled for something a little bit less and which compromises on security, possibly believing that there's no real solution out there, our out-of-box solution addresses that challenge without having to create a completely customized solution for our customers. So being able to tackle all the key aspects and bring them all together within one area.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that's clearly a great takeaway. Now, as we head towards our final question for today in terms of our panel discussion, T, it's been a lot of interesting info. Would you like to recap what this has been for you and how you are seeing this now that we know all this going forward to the market?
Okay, you give me very short time, so I will make it fast.
Don't
I'd like to
worry.
recap for our team that, you know, the EO and the project is, of course, first and foremost about security. And so we prove that we can fulfill that mandate, we can do the security. And at the same time, we think it's very good time we can take care of user experience as well because of the advance in the industry. And also because of advance of encryption and technology and so on, the total cost of ownership is there to be, you know, taken. So we believe that this DOE project is only the start. We are very excited about all the things which is coming now. And we believe that with advance in technology, with the right executive order and investment, cybersecurity will be something good in the next while.
All right, awesome. Thanks, T, for that wrap up. Okay, so now it looks like we're going to only have time to take one question from the audience here, you guys today. Sorry about that, but as always, all your questions will get answered. A rep will be reaching out to answer those on a one-by-one basis. Looking at the questions we've got in here, I've seen one come in. This is a good one and relatively short answer. You mentioned a trickle-down scenario of mandated MFA and encryption adoption. And do we have any advice for non-federal organizations that are looking to try and get ahead of the curve?
Yeah, so again, taking a look at how this affects everyone who is within that kind of radius of what's taking place for the federal government, it's for those agencies to start now and understanding what that security posture should be like for them, and being able to pull those needs forward so that it not only addresses their organizational needs, but also what's happening with their partnership with the federal government.
If we have time, I want to answer another question, which I find, very timely and good. Okay. So the question is, what's wrong with 2 or 3 factor using a PIN or a password if the first factor is OTP token? So technologically, OTP token and password rely on the share secret between the endpoint or the user and the server. And if it is shared, then somebody can take it even from the server. So asymmetric key cryptography as FIDO or certificate-based achieve the fact that you don't share your key with the server. So that's why 2, 3-factor authentication help. But if you don't have that idea that the technology doesn't share a secret with the server, then OTP is not as good as FIDO and many other things. I mean, in fact, NIST has deprecated OTP for future use as well. So that's why we believe that OTP is, if you start now, you should not rely on OTP anymore.
Okay.
I'll add there that one-time password, even if it's not SMS text message, even if it's an app, it's still phishable. And that's one of the largest, I think 50% of the attacks are based on phishing.
All right, awesome. Okay, thank you for taking in that second question. Again, really topical. Is definitely one of the right questions to answer here. So thank you for asking that amazing question. Now that we've covered some of the questions that have come in, I just wanted to take the time to thank everybody for coming, especially our panelists for joining us today, and more importantly, thank you audience members for showing up today and joining us for today's discussion on the executive order and our experience with the Department of Energy.
Thank you very much.